making friends with the cops. Gibraltar loved his stay the summer before and decided he wanted to visit again, and for another myco-spawn consumption no less. I was excited to show him around the northern woods again. It was always fun to consume green power with him, and I enjoyed rediscovering my hometown through his eyes. I picked him up from the bus stop right over the border in the Granite State, and our first order of business was to take a night walk to the local pond for some green power. We had to consume it away from my parents, who were still not cool with it. My mother warned me to be careful. The northern woods wasn't used to seeing darker-skinned individuals, and we might be targeted by the local law enforcement for such reason. Though there was some truth to this, I didn't think it'd play any real factor in the course of our night. We went out on our walk to the pond and arrived at the small bridge, currently closed to all cars. The chain-link gates to the bridge, however, were wide open, and I had walked on this bridge countless times all summer with no issue. So we walked onto the bridge and consumed some green power. Before long we saw a car coming down the hill in the opposite direction with a spotlight. It was the lovely law enforcement my mother had warned me about. The little bridge was lined with granite posts on its side rails, so I placed the paraphernalia behind a post in hopes that it would remain hidden. The cop came onto the bridge and approached us. He asked what it was we were doing on a bridge that we weren't supposed to be on, especially so late at night. I explained that it was just a stop on our walk around town, a walk we were taking because my friend had just got off the bus and needed to stretch. He informed us that the bridge was not safe to walk on, and we should have seen the sign that says, "Do not walk on bridge." I told him that I did see the sign, but the gates were wide open. It was a mixed message, and how dangerous could the bridge be if the authorities had left the gate wide open? He asked to see our IDs. When we said we didn't have ours with us, he made a disgusted face. "You guys are 20, and you don't even have any IDs?" the officer asked judgmentally. "We do have IDs, we just didn't take them on the walk because we weren't planning on presenting them tonight," I replied calmly. "Why would we bring our IDs on a walk around town when their only current use was for driving?" The cop furrowed his brow. "All right, well, I need some names to look up in the system then," he replied skeptically. "That's fine, I'm Steverino," I said confidently, "and I'm Gibraltar Kennedy," Gibraltar added in his normal, collected demeanour. The cop furrowed his brow again and walked back to his vehicle. He came back to us quickly enough and seemed a little disappointed. "Well, I guess you fellas check out. Where did y'all meet?" The cop actually sounded ashamed for jumping to conclusions. We proceeded to tell him about how we met at college and had stayed in touch, which ended up sounding like a match made in heaven story that described how this crazy ride all began. Gibraltar later commented about how we basically made friends with the law enforcement that night, and how they must have felt pretty stupid for responding to the two men doing something unknown on the forbidden bridge in the dark. Though we were let go without any sort of consequence, the cop made us walk back home from the opposite side of the bridge, which made our walk home at least half an hour longer. It was a small consequence, but a petty one for that fool to place on us. We had a good laugh about it, though, and enjoyed our walk back to my house. We knew very well we could go back in the morning and retrieve the green power apparatus from the bridge without cop trouble. First thing in the morning, we trekked back to the pond for the retrieval of the green power vessel and green power that the cop with a flashlight was unable to find. If it were a snake, it would have bit him. We went straight back to my house and consumed our mycospawn portions, moderate ones fit for the casual walk in the woods we were about to have. Since it'd only be a matter of time before the mycospawn would render me unfit for operating machinery, we hustled out the door and took the short drive over. It was surprising how quickly I started to feel the mycospawn in my blood, as trepidation shot up my spine and an electric numbness crept into my fingers. We were fine though, and made it to the woods without any hiccups. It was a beautiful mild July day, the perfect day to walk by a river surrounded by massive conifers and the occasional squirrel. We got as deep into the woods as we could so that we could consume some green power in private. Eventually, a fallen tree presented itself quite nicely, and so down we plopped. With one draw of the green power vapour, I was put right in sync with the mycospawn. Silicite sent a ringing frequency through my ear, and I watched as Gibraltar's edges frayed. I clenched my stomach, unsure about whether the nausea came from the uncertainty of what was to come or the sheer abrasiveness of the mycospawn bodies themselves. But as it always does, the nausea passed in no time, and we went on through the paths. I cannot remember much of what we talked about, but I saw the faces of the firmament present themselves in the trees, and the green of the leaf canopy grew kaleidoscopic. We found a bench to sit on by the river, and it felt like the most enormous bench I'd ever sat on, so much so that I couldn't help but laugh. As we sat there, a mother with a small family walked by, and we processed their frequencies. The mother carried a baby and made cutesy faces, while her preschool daughter tried to steal the attention verbally. Meanwhile, a middle school-aged couple trailed further behind and sheepishly held hands, perhaps because they hadn't gone much further than that yet. And lastly, there was a high school-aged girl who stared at her phone and pouted as she wore the wrong footwear for the occasion, and no doubt wished she were anywhere else. The display seemed artificial, like a simulation placed before us to remind us that we should think twice before having children. We shared a laugh after they passed, and decided to continue our journey onward. The experience was surprising in that it wasn't overwhelming, but it wasn't weak either. My mind was definitely moving a mile a minute, and most physical objects dilated and waved about. We spent time by the creek near the forest's exit as we stared at the resulting ripples of the tiny waterfall, something I found to be incredibly grounding. We made our way to the burrito restaurant in my dad's car, and I realized I still had a toe in the mycospawn verse. The shapes of the clouds in the horizon looked all too fascinating. Luckily, the music and Gibraltar's conversation kept me focused, and we arrived at the burrito shop safely. It tasted like the first burrito I had ever eaten, and the two of us struggled to not laugh at every human interaction we overheard. We couldn't help but eavesdrop on every little detail of the humans as they went about their routine lives. In the mycospawn state, it's incredible how receptive one becomes to the full energy loads of every human being, especially of those who are very attached to their egos. In the end, not much really happened on this experience in the way of major epiphanies. At least I don't think so. There doesn't always have to be major epiphanies though, and I think there's a wisdom to that in and of itself. Not every journey into the great unknown has to feel monumental to have any meaning at all. At the very least, it was a beautiful sunny day in the woods, and Gibraltar and I got to share consciousness again. My trust in the mycospawn experience had been restored, at least for the time being.